Hey guys, welcome back to Radio 815. This is episode 173. Radio 815 is the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer director J.J. Abrams as well as his greater Bad Robot universe. I'm your host for this time around. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, and I'm joined as always by my fellow co-host Matt Crandall. And on today's edition of the show, we will continue to make our way through the first and only season of the TV show entitled Undercovers. This week, we'll be talking about episode 9, entitled A Night to Forget. So, Matt, I have a question for you. I'm in Mexico. Will you come and get me?
I will, as long as you've got my favorite dog with you, because that beautiful bitch has gorgeous eyes, or whatever the fuck was the subplot of the dog in this one. So, after last week's really entertaining, finally kind of like hitting on all cylinders episode, this episode focuses on Leo, and I was like, oh no, Leo, why? But of course, we open with the bad guys. We always start with the bad guys, the faceless bad guys of the week. And we see a dude who's created some sort of toxin that looks like a diamond, and they can use it to kind of poison you. And it's a dude who always plays like a bad guy, Russian guy in like tons of stuff. So when you see his face, you're like, oh, this guy, yeah, he's villain of the week, no problem. And so he shows up. Then we quickly cut to the Blooms at home, having a good time, when their phone rings. And we realize that they have been ignoring calls from Leo for the last little while. And Steven's like, I don't want to touch this. Leo is in Sexico City, which is what they're calling Mexico City, because Leo's down there to have a fun time and screw around. But then we quickly realize, when Sam gets him on the phone, that something is amiss, and somehow it's all going to tie into this weird plot with this toxin and all this other stuff. So I did like where we see Leo drugged, and he's calling the Blooms, and he's like, I don't know where I am. I can't see straight. You guys got to help me. And then the rest of the episode, we are trying to piece together what happened in Leo's night, where he got poisoned or something happened that he now can't remember, but there's a dead hooker in the hotel room, which is just a classic bit of business for a TV show or a movie. So I thought, interesting. And also, the Blooms are going to try and clean this mess up without Shaw finding out. So I thought that groundwork for this episode was pretty interesting. How did you feel when that's the setup? It's like The Hangover, but with Leo, and they don't want to get Shaw involved.
I really liked the initial setup to this episode. I will say, though, at first, when the big bad of this episode is introduced and the guy puts a diamond into the mouth of the other guy who's trying to buy the diamonds, I'm like, what the hell? Like, did he break his neck, or did he just choke on that thing? So I found it to be so dumb. Why would you build a toxin, which is fine? Well, it's not fine, but you would not build a toxin and put it into a diamond. Like, that's so dumb. Why would you do that? But besides that one quirk of the setup of this episode that I didn't like, I thought it was very interesting and very unique that the writers kind of went away from the established norm of the episode, in that, okay, this week the Blooms have this mission to accomplish. And the fact that the mission of this episode is to go and save one of their quote unquote friends without telling Shaw, like Matt said, that opens up a whole can of worms that was really interesting to watch all throughout this episode.
While the Blooms are off, then Shaw shows up at the catering company, and he is surprised that his people aren't there. And so I like when Hotel Guy, as you know, Lizzie calls him, actually gets involved in the catering and that kind of stuff. And it's like, oh, we're actually realizing we got Gerald McCraney here. Why don't we give this great actor something to fucking do? And so I was like, so happy to see him get more to do outside of just meeting in a hotel with the Blooms to give them the exposition. And I liked that a lot. Now, the thing that obviously was my favorite part of this episode is when they get to Mexico City, the Blooms meet up with Hoyt, and they're like, Hoyt, I need to be honest with you. This is not a sanctioned mission. We are going rogue. And Hoyt goes, going rogue with Agent Bloom? This is an item off of my bucket list that I will now be able to get checked off. He's like, I can't believe this. This is incredible. And I just love that, going rogue with, and he's even like, it's okay that Samantha's here, I guess, but like me and Steven are going rogue. I thought that was so funny. And then to have them have to work backwards to figure out what went on with Leo was interesting. And, Hoyt uses technology to try and triangulate things and all that. And that's kind of just MacGuffin wheel spinning. But then once they are in the hotel room and they're trying to figure out, I like when we got to piece this mystery together. We get to have a little fun with the undercover where we think we're talking to a guy whose wife has been murdered. And it turns out he's concerned about his dog, not the dead hooker and all this stuff. So I like that it does take a few twists and turns away from the norm and felt pretty playful for the most part, especially the first half. It gets a little bit more serious when they start to realize there's like, a bank robbery and all this other MacGuffin bullshit that doesn't really matter. But the first half was so playful in they're going rogue with Leo to save Leo, and hopefully Leo didn't murder this sex worker. So like, I like that kind of stuff. And of course, I kept saying hooker or whatever. That's because this episode was from the days when that would have been the term rather than now where we use, sort of up to date language.
Yeah, no, the most interesting thing about this whole thing about the Blooms on an unsanctioned mission is really cool, but it also really, really jives with their personality. Because the Blooms are very, very good agents, which they've illustrated several times in the show, or since we've been watching the show. But they are individuals that will break the rules if they have to. So seeing them actually go against the grain in this episode is part of the course. And the one thing that I really, really enjoyed about this early setup is when the Blooms go and find Leo in the hotel room and they discover the sex worker on the ground there. Steven has a moment of going, wait a minute, did he really do this? So I really like the fact that Steven he entertains the fact that Leo could have drunk his ass. He could have drunk himself under the table, and he could have done this awful thing to this hooker. So I really appreciated that Steven had that second of doubt before Leo goes, wait a minute. You guys know me. I'm crazy. I'm stupid, but I ain't no murderer. So I really, really like that. The other thing that I really, really enjoyed, Matt brought it up. I like the fact that we get to see Shaw out of his hotel room, out of the, CIA tough guy persona. And I am really excited, or I've been really excited that we've been getting more of the kitchen staff in sort of the second half of this season. And it keeps making me more interested in a potential episode, which we're probably not going to get. The Blooms having to go undercover and using their restaurant as the cover for the whole mission, which would include the entire kitchen staff. That'll be really cool, but I don't think we're going to get that. So it was cool to see the kitchen staff again, and it was cool to see Shaw in another role rather than the one that he's been playing this whole time.
Now, with so much stuff going on with Shaw, working with the catering company, the Blooms going rogue, were you disappointed that we did not see Kelvin in this episode? Because the last episode did end with the tease that Alan Dale, Charles Widmore, was going to be playing Agent Kelvin, who we've heard on the phone, and there was some big secret that we still don't know about why the Blooms are actually back. And last episode, when we saw him in a limo, it really seemed like we were going to pick up that thread in the next episode, and we didn't. This was a standalone Leo adventure, and we don't really know where we're going with that. Obviously, we still have 4 episodes left, so hopefully we still have time. But were you disappointed when there was no more Kelvin action?
Yes, because I was really looking forward to them sort of starting to unpack that giant mystery. And like Matt said last week, they hired this accomplished character actor to be in another Bad Robot show again. So I'm really worried that they're kind of gonna just tease this, but they're not gonna give us any answers. But like Matt has hinted at, the last episode of the entire show is called The Answer. So I am very, very, very hopeful that we will get some sort of conclusion to Mr. Calvin and the real reasons why the agency wanted the Blooms back in the first place. But to answer your question, just right now, I was disappointed that we didn't see Mr. Calvin in this episode in earnest.
Yeah, and I did like, as smart as the Blooms think they are, Steven orders the removal of the dead prostitute, and then Shaw is tipped off. So I did like towards the end of this, there is a funny line when they talk about why the prostitute was even in the room, and it was like, oh, it was that guy's favorite prostitute, so he brought her, and they were going to use her as leverage for this dog. And White's like, oh, well, that's understandable. We all have our favorite prostitute. And I thought that was pretty funny. But so Shaw shows up, and I do like the scene where, all of a sudden behind Steven and Samantha is Shaw, and it's one of those like, oh my God, they're standing right behind me kind of moments, aren't they? And Shaw says like, okay, you idiots, you can't order a body removed, and I think I wouldn't hear about this. So like, I've tracked you down, but also there is more at stake because there is like this terrorist plot that's unfolding that is going to be needing our attention. So Shaw kind of, I like when he shows up after he has his playful catering company adventure, but then it's like back to business by the end, where he catches up with the Blooms and is like, I'm smarter than you guys. I'm smarter than you guys. But also, we need to take down the bad guys and focus here.
The other thing that I was thinking with that moment, which was delightful when Shaw came up behind the Blooms and they turned around and they had like this surprised look on their face, like, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I was like, Steven, you really need to rethink of your contact within the agency, because Steven told the guy that he asked for the body removal, he told it to keep it on the down low. And are you telling me that the first thing that this guy did is after he got off the phone with Steven, he ran to his superiors and said, hey guys, just so you know, one of your agents just commanded me to go into Mexico and get a body out. Like, is there no loyalty anywhere anymore?
Right. Yeah, I think there isn't loyalty, but also that guy probably had to run it up a chain somewhere to get it approved. And so even if he didn't intend to like run and tell right away.
Right.
Probably, yeah, with something as serious as aiding and abetting the disposal of a dead body, you probably gotta be honest with the higher ups.
Right. The other thing that I loved about this episode, and you'll have to let me know how you feel. There's a moment where Sam and Steven, they have to put on some very, very nice suits and nice tailored. The suits that Hoyt gets them to wear, it's amazing. I love these suits. They look so good in these damn suits. Like, I love spies wearing suits. I don't know how you feel, but I love spies wearing suits.
Well, yeah, it's very, James Bond. You got to look your best and be dressed to the nines. And definitely a fun moment in the episode.
Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, are you a pet guy? I'm not a pet guy. Are you a pet guy?
No.
Okay.
our,
You're not a pet
our
guy.
listeners will be like, what? But no,
Okay.
allergic to most pets, so no.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a pet guy because I'm not allergic. I just don't like pets. I found it really, really, really annoying that Hoyt was like obsessed with this pet for for a large part or for a tiny part of this episode. I'm like, what's the deal with the? I don't like dogs, so that was like that was like just a strike off this episode for me as well. But I also feel that the whole subplot of this episode with Leo being being drugged in Mexico and being there for various reasons. I feel that the writers really came up with the Leo subplot, not to give us another episode where Sam and Steven have to go in to stop this heist or this assassination plot in Mexico. So, what do you think about the writers finding a unique way of doing that without having to directly send Steven and Sam to Mexico to do their thing?
Yeah, I think, the whole structure of this episode is kind of almost like they could have done, us seeing Leo putting on a mask to rob a bank and then done like 24 hours earlier, like a kind of Bad Robot-esque thing, but they took the hangover amnesia approach where we're going to then piece everything together. And I think it was a nice change of pace. Even if it wasn't like executed perfectly, I think the dynamics between the characters in this episode were good, but still a lot of it felt like wheel spinning only because last week the chemistry between everybody was rocking so hard and we were getting that mythology storyline cooking. And because we took that off the back burner and sprinkled in the spice of Leo that I don't like, it's like throwing cilantro into something that's going to make me hate it. Yeah, it's tough because this is still a fun episode. And I would say so far, if I'm making like a top 5, it's in the top 5. But there was something that was just rubbing me the wrong way about part of it.
For me, this episode was like, I mean, where last week's episode for me was very, very close to the top with the pilot. This episode was very run of the mill. I know this is going to sound completely contrarian to what you said, but this episode was very run of the mill to me. Like, I know I know I just said that, and I know that I said earlier that it was very, very unique for the writers to go in this direction instead of that direction. I do appreciate that. I just want to be clear. The run of the mill stuff is with like the villain and the yeah, it's just kind of like ugh. I would have much rather preferred for them to have a villain that was tied in to the Calvin mystery and tied in to the whole reason why the Blooms were asked to come back to the agency in the first place. Granted, guys, we only have 4 episodes left to go. So we have very little real estate left to play with here.
Yeah, and what's kind of bizarre is that looking at it, last week's episode aired in like November sweeps. So like it aired at November 10th, and then this episode didn't air until December 1st. So the show was off the air for like 3 weeks over US Thanksgiving. And to come back with this one that is like a fun episode, but is again kind of a standalone, not very much carryover other than, there is a moment at the end where Lizzie and Leo hug and we still think there might be something going on. And Lizzie says like, hey, come with me to AA meetings because she thinks that Leo went on this bender and is a recovering alcoholic and all this stuff. But it's weird that the last episode ended with that great end moment. And then imagine waiting 3 weeks and being hyped for the return. And then it's like, well, all that stuff's on the back burner. So like, I keep seeing how this show went astray And like, it's not that surprising now that it got axed. But again, in today, it's crazy how in, 14, 15 years, so much can change. Because if this show was now dropped on Netflix as a binge, episodes like this wouldn't bother anyone at all. Because, oh, this one didn't have anything. Well, the next one will, and we'll just start it right now, right? So it's funny that times have changed and things that didn't work start to work. But I'm really hoping that as we approach these final four, and knowing that a couple of them didn't actually make it to air, I really hope that it goes out with a bang in some way, because they did know they were getting canceled. I don't think they knew in like a definitive, let's kill off Steven and Samantha in the finale kind of way. But I definitely think they knew in a way that like, we got to pay off the premise of the show, but also leaving the door open in case they wanted to do a revival or some other network wanted to pick it up. So I am kind of nervous about how it's going to go, but I'm also excited.
Yeah, just to go back a little bit, you mentioned that this episode aired in December, and the last episode was right during Sweep Week, was right during Sweeps Week, right before the American Thanksgiving. Most shows that do that for a purpose, because what they do is they get you on the hook, right? They have this massive reveal. And when they come back from the holiday break, they pay off that reveal. Like Lost made a career out of that. Cause 1 week you would get John Locke screaming into the void, "Give me the answer," with him looking at the hatch. Spoilers for Lost. With him looking at the hatch. And then next week, next week, him and Boom would blow that thing open. Right? And then you would have another thing. So it's very odd to me that they structured this episode like that. Do you think that they did that? Do you think that that around this time they already knew they were dead, and they were just like throwing they were throwing the episodes that they had, and they weren't really worried about paying off that giant thing that they had in the last episode?
I think that they probably saw the writing on the wall, and they also probably thought, they probably didn't know exactly how NBC was going to schedule these episodes to air. So they might have thought like, okay, we're coming back in early December. A lot of people aren't watching in December because usually you have your big November finale. Now, like, all the shows end in November. They aren't even on in December, and half of them don't come back till February, right? So the fact that this was airing some episodes in December makes me think that they intentionally made that episode like not that important in case people didn't know the show was on because they were too busy with the holidays and all that kind of thing. But the fact that the other episodes get burnt off, like this one airs December 1st, the next one doesn't air until the 22nd. And like, I gotta tell you, nobody airs new shows on the 22nd of December nowadays. And even back then, I don't think that was that common. So like that scheduling of like, it's playing Christmas week and then the next episode is 2 days before New Year's. Like usually shows are not new then. So they obviously knew it was done because they were just burning it off rather than holding it for like a January or a February. And that also probably hinged on when they wrote episode 9, they might have known they weren't doing very good, but they probably still thought they were getting the back 9 pickup. And then when 10, 11, 12, 13 get burnt off, like if you didn't think the show was on between Christmas and New Year's, sorry, you missed the finales. Like, I'm pretty sure that's just NBC was like, we're not picking you up and we're just washing our hands of this way too expensive show that nobody is watching.
Wow, folks, that is why Matt is on the show, because Matt often takes a little thing that I say and he goes, well, this is how it could work out. And I love what you said there, that this episode could have been a placeholder. And that's why they kind of decided, hey, why don't we just put this here just to make sure that people, for those that can still be watching, that hey, so these people know that we're still on the air, and next week we can come back, or in a couple weeks we can come back with the bigger episode. It's just really strange to me that by having it air a couple days before the new year, they knew that they were dead. like you never do that now. That's impossible. That's like shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, like there's most newer shows now, like they don't air a single episode in December. Like forget it. So it's wild that this thing, the last, well, however many they ended up airing, all aired in December, and like December 22nd and 29th, forget about it.
Yeah, I mean, moving forward, I for the last four that we have coming up here, I just really want some kind of resolution for this, for the whole reason that the agency wanted them to come back. Like, if Mr. Kelvin doesn't come into the fray, which will really piss me off because that's a really great character actor. If he doesn't come back into the fray, I'm fine with that. But the one thing that I won't be fine with is if Shaw doesn't tell them. If these four episodes happen like business as usual and we get no answers, I will be pissed. But if Shaw does eventually sit them down and say, hey, just so you know, this is why you guys were asked back and the Blooms have to deal with that for an episode or a couple, I'll be happy with that. But would you be upset if Mr. Calvin doesn't come into the show proper?
I think that what we're setting ourselves up for is Kelvin is going to make a few light appearances. I think we're going to have him and Shaw bickering about whether they can tell the Blooms or not. I think the finale of the show, and again, I haven't seen the finale of the show, I think knowing that it's titled The Reason, I think that they are going to find out why they were brought back. And it's not the reason they thought. And I think they are going to be upset by the actual reason, and they are going to want out. And I think that they might actually get out, because what they would have done is that in episode 13, before we go on hiatus until, March or whatever, it would have been like, well, if you guys brought us in for this reason, fuck you, we're done. And they would go, and then, in episode 14 would be when Shaw would have to bring them back into the fold and make it up to them that they brought them in under false pretenses, and then they would be doing the job and trying to save the day against whatever nefarious thing we don't fully know about. But I feel like the way it's going to end is going to be, it works as a series finale because they find out why they were brought back, but they end up leaving. But it also would have teed up, they would have come back for more because the agency would desperately need them and have to beg them into action.
I really like that scenario that you cooked up there, in that we might see Mr. Calvin in sporadically in these last four episodes, but I really like the idea of the Blooms being upset when they find out the real reason why the agency wants them back. And I really like the idea of them walking away from it all. Because I do think that the Blooms are a great couple, and I do think they have a great rapport with one another, obviously. But I do think that there's a part of their relationship there that they're refusing to acknowledge because they're, both of them were spies. And I do think once they let that go fully, I do think that they can. I think that their marriage can be I think that their marriage is going to be in a better place when they do let that thing go fully. I mean, I might be talking in a master, which I probably am, but I do think that the idea of them saying, no, we're going to step away, is a great way to end the series proper.
We'll have to see, because we're in the home stretch now. So I think that we'll hopefully be satisfied.
All right, guys. Well, that'll do it for this edition of Radio 815. Listen, guys, if you like the work that Matt and I are doing here and you want to send us an email with comments, questions, praise, you're more than happy to do that. Our email is radio815@aol.com. We are also on Twitter or X or whatever you choose to call it. We are at JJ Universe 815. If you want to talk to me about the Undercovers or anything in the Bad Robot Lexicon, I am on X or Twitter. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But if you want to endeavor to find Matt nowadays, he's like trying to find Mr. He's like trying to find Where's Waldo at this point. You can attempt to do that. Matt, how can they attempt to do that?
We can log some movies on letterboxd.com/MDC3000.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to us. I hope that you're enjoying this series. And if you're listening to us for the first time, I invite you to go back to our back catalog and check out all our other amazing shows that we've covered. We've covered Felicity, Lost, Alias, a bunch of Bad Robot stuff. So I invite you to check out our back catalog if that's something that you're interested in, and if you're listening to us for the first time. But until next time, as I often say, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.